Ever wondered why the United States, a country with such a powerful history, never had a king? Why is it a republic with a president, not a monarchy? It's a fascinating story that goes right back to the very beginning. Let's dive into the history and find out why there are no kings in America. Before the United States was, well, the United States, it was 13 separate colonies under the rule of Great Britain. And who ruled Great Britain? A king, of course. Specifically, King George III. For the colonists, life under a distant monarch wasn't always a fairy tale. They felt their rights were being trampled, their voices unheard. Imagine getting taxed without having any say in the matter. That was the reality. The British Parliament, thousands of miles away, would pass laws like the Stamp Act and the Tea Act, imposing taxes on the colonists. The rallying cry became no taxation without representation. The colonists argued that since they didn't have elected representatives in the British Parliament, that Parliament had no right to tax them. It felt unfair, like being forced to follow rules made by someone who didn't understand their daily lives or struggles. This feeling of injustice grew stronger over time. The king was seen not as a benevolent protector, but as a tyrant. He sent troops to enforce his laws, limited their trade with other countries, and generally treated the colonies as a source of income for the British Empire, rather than as a community of his subjects with their own rights and needs. The colonists felt like second-class citizens in their own land. So, when the time came for revolution, the idea of simply replacing one king with another was the last thing on anyone's mind. The American Revolution wasn't just about changing the person on the throne. It was about changing the entire system of government. The Founding Fathers, men like Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin, were deeply influenced by the ideas of the Enlightenment. Thinkers like John Locke had proposed radical new ideas, that governments should get their power from the consent of the governed, not from divine right or hereditary succession. The idea that all people were born with certain inalienable rights like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was revolutionary. A monarchy, where one person holds power simply because of their birth, stood in direct opposition to these principles. So, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence in 1776, it was basically a long list of grievances against King George III. It was a breakup letter with monarchy itself. They declared that governments are created to secure the rights of the people, and when a government fails to do that, the people have the right to change it. This was the philosophical foundation for a new kind of nation. After winning the Revolutionary War, the challenge was to create this new government. Their first attempt, the Articles of Confederation, created a very weak central government because they were so afraid of concentrating power in one place, like with a king. But it was too weak, and the new country was struggling. This led to the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Here, the delegates debated furiously about what their new government should look like. Now, here's a little-known fact. The idea of a monarchy asterisk was asterisk briefly floated. One delegate, Alexander Hamilton, at one point suggested a president for life, which sounded a lot like an elected monarch. However, this idea was quickly and overwhelmingly rejected. The memory of King George III was too fresh. The entire spirit of the revolution was against it. The American people had fought and died to free themselves from a king. They weren't about to install a new one. George Washington, the hero of the Revolution, was so popular that some people might have accepted him as a king. But Washington himself was completely against the idea. There's a famous story where one of his officers, Louis Nicola, suggested that Washington should become king of the United States. Washington's response was swift and angry. He called the idea abhorrent and said it was the greatest mischief that could befall his country. He believed deeply in the Republican ideal of government of the people, by the people, for the people. By rejecting the crown, Washington set a powerful precedent. He showed that in America, leadership would be earned and temporary, not inherited and permanent. Instead of a monarchy, the Founding Fathers created a republic with a system of checks and balances. They created 3 separate branches of government: the legislative Congress, the executive, the president, and the judicial, the Supreme Court. Power was deliberately divided to prevent any one person or group from becoming too powerful, just like a king. The president would be elected for a limited term, accountable to the people, not born into power. The Constitution specifically forbids granting titles of nobility. Article 1, Section 9 states, "No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States." This was a direct rejection of the aristocratic class system that defined European monarchies. In America, the ideal was that anyone, regardless of their birth, could rise to the highest office in the land. Your last name didn't matter as much as your character and abilities. So the reason the US never had a king comes down to 3 main things: a bitter experience with a real king, a deep belief in the new philosophical ideas of liberty and self-governance, and the principled leadership of figures like George Washington, who rejected absolute power. The American experiment was to prove that a nation could govern itself without a monarch, that ordinary citizens could be trusted with the power to choose their own leaders and determine their own destiny. It was a radical idea at the time, and it shaped the identity of the United States in a profound way. The absence of a throne is not just a historical accident. It's a deliberate choice that is woven into the very fabric of the nation. And that's why, to this day, you'll find a president in the White House, not a king in a castle. It is a legacy of revolution and a testament to the idea that power should belong to the people. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical journey. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and let me know in the comments what other historical questions you'd like me to explore. See you in the next video.